The first time I saw it, it wasn't a monster in the dark. It was a smear on the inside of a helmet seal, right where the salt dries. I ran life support on a saturation job. Hyperbaric chamber, gas mixes, scrubbers, the boring stuff that keeps divers from dying slow and stupid. It's not glamorous. It's gauges and checklists and little failures that can turn into a funeral if you blink. You learn to listen to machines the way other people listen to music. The pitch of a compressor, the lazy gurgle in a condensate line, the way a valve handle feels when it's about to bind. We were working off a converted supply boat, squat and ugly, with a sat spread bolted down like a parasite. Chamber complex, gas racks, hot water units, dive control container. Everything smelled like rubber and brine and old coffee. There was always moisture somewhere, no matter how much you wiped. Condensation on the steel, sweat in gloves, salt crust in corners. The ocean climbed into your life and sat there like it owned the place. We did long bottom time in bad water, the kind that sits on top of trenches like a lid. You don't swim down there. You drop. You sink. The ocean presses your ribs until you stop feeling like a person and start feeling like a container. Your world narrows to what's inside your helmet. Your breath, your own heartbeat, the radio, and the faint constant hiss of gas moving through places you can't see. The job was supposed to be simple on paper. Client had a piece of subsea infrastructure they didn't want named out loud. Some inspection and corrective work on something that definitely wasn't there, in a place that definitely wasn't on any brochure map. The kind of contract where everyone on deck suddenly uses initials instead of nouns. The kind where the client rep shows up in clean boots and sunglasses and never looks directly at the water. Our deck boss, Lau, loved those jobs. He loved the money and the silence. He loved telling people, we're doing what others won't. He loved acting like that meant he was tough instead of just greedy. I hated him. Not the normal, eye-rolling kind of hate you feel for every boss who thinks your job is just pushing buttons. I hated him because he didn't believe in consequences. He believed in schedules. He believed in the client. He believed in shouting louder than physics. The divers were sat divers, living under pressure for weeks, sleeping in bunks stacked like coffins, eating from trays, pissing into the system, sweating out their lives. You watch men become smaller in weird ways and sat. Not physically, mentally. They stop being guys and start being assets. They talk in short bursts. They pick fights over dumb shit because everything else feels too big. Then they go back under and act like gods because the sea makes them feel that way. That day started normal. Too normal. Calm sea, gray sky. The kind of flat horizon that makes you feel like you're sitting inside a bowl. We just finished a bell run. 2 divers down, 1 standby in the chamber. I had the life support panel in front of me, my hands smelling like analyzer fluid and nitrile. I was watching numbers because that's what you do when you're responsible for keeping people alive. You stare at boring lines and try to catch the moment they start to lie. Then the bell came up and the comms got loud. Open the fucking hatch. One of the divers snapped, voice clipping through the speakers like it was chewing on the mic. Open it now. You can tell a lot from a voice in a helmet. You hear the effort. You hear panic before the words admit it. You hear when someone's trying to act normal and failing. Dive supervisor, Mac, leaned toward his console. Mac was old school. He didn't waste words. He didn't waste sympathy either. Calm down, Mac said. You're on deck. You're safe. Talk to me. I'm not safe, the diver said. I got something under the seal. It's fucking moving. Everybody in dive control glanced at me, then glanced away like it wasn't their problem. That's the thing about dive teams. When a diver says, something's under my seal, half the room thinks, yeah, hair, sweat, sand, your imagination, you big baby. The other half thinks, if it's real, don't touch me with those gloves. The diver's name was Harris. Thick neck, shaved head, always joking, always the first to talk shit. He wasn't a scare man, not normally. He was the kind who'd tap the chamber wall in the middle of the night just to mess with the other guys. The bell hatch swung open and he climbed out like he was escaping a fire. He kicked his suit boots off like they betrayed him. He kept clawing at his collar ring, digging under the edge with stiff fingers. "Sit," I told him sharp. "Stop fucking moving." "I need it off," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word like his throat didn't want to shape it. "Get it off." "You don't get it off until I say," I said. "You want to bend your schedule? You want to blow down too fast and turn your blood into a fucking soda? Sit down." He tried to pace anyway. Mac blocked him with one arm like a bouncer. Harris shoved at him, then hissed through his teeth like the act of moving hurt. "Easy," Mac said. "You're in SAT. We do this right." Harris leaned forward and spit. Not on purpose, just it fell out of him. I stepped in close. The suit smelled like hot rubber and seawater and the faint sharp bite of helium. His gloved hands kept grabbing at nothing, like he was trying to catch something crawling on his neck. "Talk to me," I said. "Is it pressure?" "Ears. Chest. It's under the seal," he said, and his eyes were wide in a way I didn't like. "It's like a hair, but it's not a hair. It's tugging. Divers say weird shit. Pressure plays tricks. CO2 gives you doom. Nitrogen narcosis makes you poetic and stupid." But Harris wasn't deep on nitrogen. He wasn't on a bounce. He'd been in the system. His partial pressures were where they should be. The only thing he should have been feeling was tired and annoyed. "Hold still," I said. I pulled his helmet. It should have been sweat and hair and that rubber stink. Instead, there was a clear film stretched across the seal, like someone had wiped it with egg white. It clung to my glove. It didn't drip. It held. For a second, my brain tried to file it as something normal. Lube. Seal crease. Some contaminant from the water. But it wasn't slick like grease. It had tension. It had memory. When I touched it, it pulled back like it didn't want to leave the ring. "Jesus Christ," Mac muttered, not even trying to hide it. Harris sucked air hard through his mouth and started coughing. Not a wet cough, not sickness. More like his throat wanted to eject something that didn't belong. He leaned forward and retched into the bucket we kept for exactly this reason. I expected bile. A thin thread slid out with his spit. Not mucus. Too elastic. It hit the air and twitched like it hated the temperature. I didn't freeze. I didn't scream. I did what my job trained me to do, contain. I snapped the bucket lid on and shoved it under my bench. I grabbed a clear sample bag, peeled it open, and pressed it to the inside of the helmet seal without thinking. The film stretched, then broke away in a strip, then tried to pull itself back to the ring like a tongue to a tooth. It left a faint wet outline on the rubber, like it had been sitting there a while. "Who touched the bell umbilical?" I barked. "Who handled the hat?" One of the tenders lifted his hands. "I did the last hookup. Same as always." "Did you drop it?" I said. "No," he snapped back. "Jesus. No." Harris coughed again, shoulders jerking, and a second thread slid from his mouth. This one was thicker. It stuck to his lip, and then it pulled. Like something on the other end yanked it back. He slapped at his mouth, furious, and that's when I saw his glove stick for half a second, then release with a little stretch that made my stomach turn. Mac's eyes flicked to me. He didn't have to ask. We were thinking the same thing. Whatever this was, it wasn't just on the helmet. "Chamber," I said. "Now." Lyle chose that moment to show up, like the universe was trying to make sure the worst person in any situation always arrived right on time. "What's the hold up?" he shouted before he even got through the door. He had that brisk, pissed-off tone he used when he wanted people to remember he signed their checks. Clients asking why the bell's not turning around. Mac didn't answer. Mac never answered Lyle if he could avoid it. He pointed at Harris. Pointed at me. "Let Lyle look." Lyle looked, saw Harris retching, saw the helmet in my hands, saw the way everyone had stepped back like the air around Harris was toxic. "What is this?" Lyle said, lower. "Hangover?" He swallows seawater. "It's contamination," I said. "From what?" "A fucking jellyfish." Lyle scoffed, and the laugh he put on it was forced. I heard the crack in it anyway. "We're not in a goddamn aquarium." "Chamber," I said again, and I did it like a command because it was. Lyle stepped into my space. He smelled like cigarettes and diesel and the kind of cologne men were to pretend they don't stink. "Don't you start," he said. "We have another drop." "The client." "Get out of my way," I said. He opened his mouth to argue, and Harris suddenly made a sound that shut everyone up. Not a cough, not a gag, a wet, strangled inhale like his chest hit a wall. He bent forward and braced his hands on his knees. His shoulders trembled. Under the skin of his neck, right above the collar ring, something pushed. A small pale knot rose, like a bead under a rubber sheet. Then another, marching in a line toward his jaw. Harris grabbed his throat and squeezed like he could crush it back down. Mac grabbed him by the suit harness and hauled him toward the chamber hatch. The tenders moved with him, fast and practiced, but with that extra tightness you only get when you're scared and try not to show it. I followed, carrying the helmet and the sealed bucket like they were live grenades. The chamber complex sat off to the side of the deck under a shelter, steel, and pipes and thick doors. It always felt like you were stepping into the belly of something. Inside, the air tasted wrong. Not bad, just artificial. Dry in places it shouldn't be dry, wet in places it shouldn't be wet. Every surface held a film of salt you could never fully scrub off. I got Harris into the entry lock. I started the procedure by muscle memory, my voice steady because the guys needed it steady. Sit on the bench. Don't scratch. Don't rub your eyes. I told him. Something's in me, he rasped. And it was the first time I ever heard Harris sound small. It might be irritation. I lied because sometimes you lie to keep someone from making it worse. We'll check you. We'll flush. You'll be fine. He leaned forward and spat again. The spit stringed, hung, then snapped back toward his mouth like a rubber band. My skin went cold. I shut the inner door, sealed the lock, started equalizing pressure for transfer. Mac watched from the outside window, jaw clenched, while hovered behind him like a mosquito that couldn't understand why people kept swatting. "What are you doing?" While demanded through the comms. "We don't have time for this. Put him on O2, clear him, send him back." He's always dramatic. "He's not going back down," I said. "I'll decide that," Lyle snapped. "No," I said. "You won't." That got him. That was the first real fight, the one where the veneer cracked. Lyle jabbed a finger at the chamber like the chamber cared. "You think you're captain now? You think because you sit on your ass watching dials you get to stop operations?" I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on my panel. I kept my hands moving. I kept my voice level because if I let it wobble, I'd give him a handle. "I keep your divers alive," I said. "That's my job. Today, my job says no." The transfer finished. Harris moved into the living chamber with the other sat diver inside. Ramos, who'd been standby. Ramos sat up in his bunk, took one look at Harris's face, and swore. "What the fuck happened?" Ramos asked. "Don't touch him." I snapped into the intercom. "Stay back." Harris tried to stand, and his legs didn't listen. He lurched like gravity changed. He caught himself on the table, and then, for a second, his fingers stuck to the steel. When he pulled away, something thin stretched between his glove and the tabletop, then snapped. Ramos backed up so fast he banged his shoulder on the wall. "Get a medic," Lyle barked. "We're offshore," Max said flat. "We have who we have." Lyle glared at me. "Do something then." I did. I ran the table. I adjusted the mix. I watched CO2 and O2 like a hawk. I checked scrubbers. I checked dew point. I checked everything that could explain panic and physical symptoms. Normal, normal, normal. That's when dread settles in, when you can't blame the machines. Harris kept scratching his chest like he had ants under his skin. I told him to stop. He didn't. His gloves dragged over the suit, and the sound came through the chamber mic, a dry rasp that made my teeth hurt. He pressed harder. He started clawing like he wanted to rip the suit off. "Stop," I shouted, and my voice came out sharper than I meant. "You'll tear the damn thing." "I can feel it," he said, and his breath whistled. "It's fucking moving." He gagged and retched into the chamber's small waste funnel. This time, something came up that wasn't stomach. A thin, pale filament slid out, looped on his tongue, and then pulled back in like it had a mind of its own. Ramos made a strangled sound and turned away, breathing hard through his nose like he was trying not to inhale anything. "Lock him down," Lyle said behind me, like he was ordering a dog. "I already did," I said. He didn't like that. He liked action that looked like action. He didn't understand that the most violent thing you can do to something unknown is contain it. I switched my attention to the breathing circuit. The moisture traps are clear little canisters in the line. They catch condensate. They're supposed to fill with water, maybe a little oil from the system if you got a leak. You drain them, you move on. Harris's exhale trap started clouding up. At first I thought it was just crap, a contaminant from his breath. Blood, aerosol, vomit. But it wasn't brown. It wasn't red. It wasn't yellow. It turned the clear trap a milky white, like someone poured cream into it and stirred. Then it stopped swirling randomly. It made loops. It made grids. It kept trying to pull itself into a shape like it remembered being a net. I leaned closer to the viewport and watched like an idiot, like staring harder would change physics. The milky stuff crawled up the inside wall of the trap against gravity. It gathered at the top, then slid along the curve toward the outlet. Searching. My throat tightened. That's not fluid behavior. Not like that. I grabbed the intercom switch and killed it. Matt glanced at me. "Why'd you cut comms?" "I don't want him hearing me," I said. "What?" I swallowed. "I don't want whatever's in that circuit hearing me." Mac's eye stayed on me for a beat longer than comfortable. Then he looked away, jaw working, because he didn't want to say I was right, but he didn't want to say I was wrong either. Lyle, of course, heard none of that. He stomped back into dive control with a face like thunder. "This is bullshit," he said. "We're behind. You're going to cost us a fortune." "Go yell at the ocean," I said without looking. He slammed his hand down on my console. The vibration rattled my coffee cup. "Don't get cute," he said. "Open the damn hatch. We'll pull him. We'll get him cleaned. We'll get him to the medic. He's not dying in that steel can because you're scared of what mucus?" "It's not mucus," I said. "You don't know what it is," he snapped. "Exactly." I turned to face him then. I kept my voice quiet, because quiet makes people lean in, and leaning in makes them listen. "The only reason it's not crawling into the rest of us is because the chamber holds pressure," I said. "Whatever it is, it likes gradients. It likes difference." It climbed out of deep water into a helmet seal because it found a path. If we crack that chamber at surface pressure, we give it a ladder. Lyle stared at me like I'd just started talking about ghosts. "You're a paranoid bitch," he said, and he said it with that tone men use when they want to flatten you. "You're making up sea monsters because you want to play hero." I laughed once sharp. "Hero? I'm the guy who cleans piss lines and changes scrubber cartridges. I don't want to be a hero. I want to go home with my lungs intact." He swung at me. He didn't throw a good punch. He threw a boss punch. All anger, no technique. I ducked and drove my shoulder into his chest, shoved him back into the steel wall of the container hard enough to make the whole module ring. A console alarm chirped, offended. Mac was on him in an instant, forearm across Lyle's collarbone. "Enough," Mac growled. Lyle struggled, face red. "Let go of me." "You hit my LST," Mac said. "You hit him again, you're off my spread." Lyle jerked his chin toward the chamber window. "Your diver is in there, turning into soup, and you're playing tough guy." Mac didn't answer him. Mac looked at me instead. It was a question without words. What now? What now was the part nobody trains you for. There's no procedure for unknown, pressure-loving thing in a man's throat. I forced myself to breathe slow. I forced myself to look at numbers instead of imagination. Harris's vitals on the monitor were weird. Heart rate spiking, then dropping. Oxygen saturation reading fine, but his face told another story. His eyes kept going unfocused, like he was watching something move inside the air. He slapped the inside of the chamber window with his palm. His mouth moved, shaping words I couldn't hear. I didn't want to hear them. I didn't want to give the situation a voice. Then he did something I'll never unsee. He stood up, took one step, and froze mid-motion like somebody hit pause on him. His arms lifted without his permission, elbows locking. His mouth opened. His lips pulled back. Not a scream, more like his face forgot how to be a face. Under the skin of his neck, those pale knots rose again. Not random, in sequence, like beads sliding along a string. Ramos scrambled backward, banging into the bunk. He started hammering on the chamber wall, screaming through the muffled mic-eyed cut. I saw his mouth open wide, saw the cords in his neck, saw fear pour out of him like sweat. Harris jerked forward and his forehead hit the glass. The impact should have left a smear. Instead, it left a wet handprint from inside, as if something pressed outward against his skin and printed him like a stamp. I'll stop struggling. His eyes locked on that print, and I watched the denial die on his face in real time. He went pale under his anger. I killed the chamber lights so he couldn't see what I saw next. That was me being selfish. I didn't want a crowd reacting wrong. Panic makes people do stupid shit with hatches. I switched to emergency red, the low kind that keeps you from losing night vision. In red, the chamber looked like a submarine movie. In red, Harris looked like a silhouette. In red, the thing inside him showed up. It didn't have a body. It had routes. Every time Harris exhaled, faint lines flickered under his skin, thin as fishing line, running from his chest to his throat, then branching toward his jaw, his ears, his eyes. It used his blood vessels like highways. It used pressure changes like a pump. It wasn't alive the way people mean it. It was alive like a siphon is alive, like a current is alive. Lyle's voice came out smaller than before. "Open it." "No," I said. "Open it," he repeated, and I heard the crack in him. "He's dying. He's already contaminated," I said. "If you open it, we all are." "You don't know that," Lyle shouted. "I know gradients," I said. "I know pressure. I know how things move when you give them a path. This is a fucking path." He lunged toward the chamber hatch like he could just do it himself. Matt grabbed him again, but Lyle had weight and panic, and that makes people strong. I grabbed the nearest thing, an adjustable wrench, and cracked him across the side of the head. Not hard enough to kill him, hard enough to make him sit down and shut up. He hit the deck with a wet thud and blinked like he didn't understand why gravity had betrayed him. Max stared at me for half a second, then looked away, jaw tight. He didn't like violence. He liked order, but he didn't argue. "Get him out of here," I said. Two tenders hauled Lyle toward the galley, cursing under their breath. One of them looked back at me like I just crossed a line you don't cross. Maybe I had. I didn't care. Lines mean nothing when something is trying to climb out of a man through a hose. I sealed the chamber and sat with my hand on the control panel like a priest sitting with a coffin. Inside, Harris started peeling. Not his skin, his inside. The pale knots under his neck moved upward and then split into threads that pushed into his mouth. He gagged and tore at his own face, and the threads slapped his hand away like they had reflexes. His fingernails broke. Blood drifted in little slow-motion bursts, then stuck to the inside of the visor like paint. Ramos slammed his fists against the wall, begging, screaming, but the red light and the thick steel made it look like a silent film. It made it worse, honestly. Silence gives horror room to echo. The exhale trap filled. The milk climbed the clear walls of plastic and reached for the outlet like it wanted out of the circuit, out of the chamber, out of the fucking box. I did the only thing I could do that wasn't hero bullshit. I increased the chamber pressure. I didn't do it fast. Fast qu'il d'hiver. I did it controlled, but I did it higher than we'd ever run for comfort. I watched the gauges climb. I watched Harris's body respond like it was suddenly under a heavier ocean. Everything in the chamber compressed. Harris slumped like gravity doubled. The threads stopped racing. They tightened. They tucked themselves back down into him like something retreating into a crack. Ramos slid down the wall, shaking, hands covering his mouth. Harris didn't look relieved. He looked owned. Mac leaned in close to my ear. "What are you doing?" Pinning it, I whispered. "With pressure," he said, incredulous. "It came up," I said. "So push it down." Mac's face twisted, like he wanted to tell me that wasn't how biology worked. But then he looked at the handprint on the chamber glass, faintly visible even in red, and he shut his mouth. Hours crawled. The rig rocked. The ocean kept moving under us like it had a pulse. Every now and then the hull creaked in a way that made the hair on my arms lift. The kind of creak you feel in your teeth, deep in your jaw. I ran checks constantly because constant checking is what you do when your brain is trying not to scream. Scrubber canisters. Okay. En injection, stable. CO2 levels, controlled. Temperature, steady. Humidity, climbing but manageable. Harris lay on the deck of the chamber, chest rising too slow, eyes half open like he was watching something on the ceiling. Ramos stayed in his bunk, curled tight, eyes fixed on Harris like if he looked away it would move. At some point, I heard a sound that wasn't supposed to be in dive control. A drip, soft, slow, plink, plink. We had water everywhere on the boat. Pipes, condensation, leaks he never fully fixed. But this drip was too deliberate, too steady, like a metronome. I traced it to the breathing gas manifold inside the control container. A stainless line, bone dry, suddenly had a bead of liquid forming at a fitting. The bead swelled, then fell. Plink. I crouched and touched it with a gloved finger. It wasn't water. It was slick. It held to the glove for a second, then stretched when I pulled away. My stomach dropped. I wiped my finger on a rag, and the rag stuck to itself like it had glue. Max saw my face. What? I didn't answer right away. I grabbed a flashlight and shined along the lines, checking every joint. Another bead formed. Plink. How the fuck? I whispered. The line was pressurized helium-oxygen mix. There shouldn't be any liquid in it. Not like that. Not unless something was condensing out or something was generating it. I straightened slowly, and the room felt smaller. That's the moment it shifted from thing in a diver to thing in the system. Lyle came back, holding his head, furious and embarrassed. He looked at the chamber window, looked at Harris, looked at the red light, and his eyes flicked away like he didn't want to believe his own memory. "You assaulted me," he said to me, voice thick with outrage. "You tried to open the chamber," I said. "You don't get to hit me because you're scared," he snapped. "Try it again," Max said, and his voice was calm in a way that made Lyle flinch. "Touch that hatch without my say. I'll put you overboard." Lyle stared at him like he couldn't believe he'd been challenged. Then his gaze slid to the client rep standing in the doorway. Yeah, the client rep had arrived. Quiet guy, no name I ever heard. Always on a satellite phone, always watching. He'd been told something was wrong, and now he was here because whatever this was might cost money or secrets. And those two things bring suits faster than blood brings sharks. The rep's eyes were flat. He looked at the chamber like it was a piece of equipment, not a place with a man inside being turned into a ladder. "What happened?" he said. Not a question, a demand. Mac started, but I cut in because Mac would soften it and this didn't deserve soft. Diver came up with contamination in his hat. I said, unknown organism or material. It's in his breathing circuit. It's responding to pressure. The rep didn't blink. "Can you remove it?" "No," I said. "Why not?" "Because we don't know what it does at surface pressure," I said. "Because it's already moving through our gas system." The rep's mouth tightened slightly, like a man tasting something bitter. "We can't stop operations." Mac barked a laugh. "Watch us." The rep turned his gaze to the manifold drip. He noticed it. He wasn't dumb. "What is that?" he asked. "I don't know," I said, "but it shouldn't be there." The rep looked at Lyle. Lyle puffed up, eager for authority like a starving dog. "We need to keep the schedule," Lyle said quickly. "We can isolate the chamber. We can flush lines. We can do nothing until we understand," I snapped. Lyle spun on me. "You don't understand shit, you button pusher. You're not a biologist." "I understand pressure," I said. "I understand containment. I understand that if you crack that chamber, you're letting something that lived at depth into a boat full of warm bodies and open air." The rep watched me for a long moment. Then he said, "Increase pressure." Mac blinked. "What?" The rep's voice didn't change. "Increase pressure. If it's pressure responsive, pin it. We can transport the system under pressure." We can move to a secure facility. Lyle sputtered. That'll kill him. It might save everyone else, the rep said, and the casualness of it made me hate him in a clean, bright way. Like a blade, Harris made a slow movement inside the chamber. He lifted his hand, palm outward, like he was pressing against glass. His fingers trembled, then stopped rigid. A thin white line flickered under his forearm. Ramos started pounding on the wall again, mouth wide. The rep didn't react. Do it, he said. So I did. I increased the chamber pressure again, incremental, controlled, higher than comfort, edging into the kind of pressure you only run for short periods. I watched Harris's chest slow. I watched his eyes roll. I watched Ramos vomit into his own hands and then shake, helpless. I hated myself while I did it, which was new. I'd made hard calls before. You do in this job, but this wasn't just a hard call. This was choosing to squeeze a man's life like a stress ball because it might keep something else from climbing. The drip at the manifold slowed, then stopped. My heart lurched with relief I didn't trust. Mac exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Okay, he said, rough. Okay, we stabilize. We head in. We call medevac. Lyle pointed at the rep like he'd found an ally. See, this is what I've been saying. We keep moving. We don't. Mac cut him off. Shut up. Lyle's face twisted. Excuse me? Shut. Mac repeated louder, the fuck up. You don't talk. You don't touch. You don't make decisions right now. Lyle took a step toward Mac, puffed up, angry. Mac didn't move. Mac's calm was like a wall. The client rep watched the whole thing like it was a play he'd already seen. Then from somewhere deep in the boat, we heard a sound. A ping. Not a sonar ping from the ship's sounder. Not the normal tick you hear from nearby vessels. This was inside. Metallic. Sharp. Like someone tapping a steel pipe with a wrench. Ping. Everyone froze. Another ping. Slower. Ping. Mac's eyes flicked toward the chamber complex. That coming from in there? I swallowed. No, because I knew the chamber sounds. I knew the groans, the creaks, the settling. This wasn't the chamber. This was a line. A pipe. The system. Ping. Then the drip started again. Not at the manifold. Somewhere else. A place I couldn't immediately locate. I moved fast, flashlight in hand, scanning the gas racks, the hoses, the fittings. Every surface looked normal until the beam caught a sheen on the floor. A thin trail. Clear. Slick. Leading under a cabinet. My skin tightened over my bones. The rep spoke, calm as ever. It's moving. Lyle's voice came out like a squeak. No, it can't. It's in the chamber. I crouched, shined the light under the cabinet, and saw the trail disappear into a drain line. Our piss line. Our waste system. The thing wasn't just in a breathing circuit. It was using our infrastructure like a map. It was finding gradients anywhere it could. Pressure, temperature, moisture, anything that told it where up was. Close the drains, I snapped. Mac yelled for tenders. Boots thudded. People moved fast now. No arguing, because the sound of a drip in the wrong place will change a man faster than any speech. We started isolating systems. Valves closed. Lines capped. Traps drained into sealed containers. I slapped tags on everything like it mattered, like paper could stop something that moved like a thought. Inside the chamber, Harris convulsed once hard, then went still again. The lines under his skin flickered faintly, then dimmed, like whatever lived in him didn't like being pinned. Ramos sat in his bunk, knees hugged to chest, staring at Harris like he was staring a loaded gun. I didn't turn the intercom back on. I couldn't. I didn't want to hear Harris's voice if it was still his. I didn't want to hear Ramos begging. I didn't want to give the thing inside them a new channel. I'll try to take control again when the chaos shifted from argument to emergency. That's what he did. He couldn't handle unknown, but he could handle barking orders. Get the bell ready, he shouted. We'll send the standby. No bell, Max snapped. We need to finish the work, Lyle insisted while died now. We need to, the client rep said, almost gently, the work is finished. Lyle blinked. What? The rep didn't look at him. He looked at the chamber. We're leaving. Now. Max stared at him. You could just decide that? The rep's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Yes. That was when I understood what kind of job this really was. Not just covert, not just classified, disposable. We were tools. If the tool got contaminated, you didn't fix it. You locked it in a box and buried it somewhere no one could sue you for. And I was sitting at the controls of the box. We started transit toward shore before sunrise. The boat's engines rumbled low and steady, and the vibration traveled through the deck into my boots. Usually that vibration is comforting. It means you're moving. It means you're leaving something behind. This time it felt like we were dragging something with us. The sea stayed calm, which made me angrier than a storm would have. A storm you can blame. Calm feels like permission. I stayed in dive control the whole time. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I drank bad coffee and watched the moisture traps like they were ticking bombs. Every time the milky pattern shifted, my gut clenched. The milk kept making grids. It kept trying to make itself into a net. And every time the chamber pressure adjusted, tiny changes as we stabilized, the pattern reacted. It tightened. It loosened. It searched. The drip sounds moved around the system like footsteps in a hallway. We'd hear it near the racks, then an hour later near the waistline, then near the hot water unit. Always in places where there shouldn't be liquid. Always as if it was testing the boat, tapping walls, finding weak points. Ping, plink, ping, plink. By late afternoon, Lal had burned through anger and landed in bargaining. That's what people do when they can't dominate a problem. They try to make deals with it. He cornered me by the coffee machine, where the smell of burnt grounds mixed with steel and salt. "You're going to get us all fired," he said, voice low. I laughed without humor. "We're already fired. You just don't know it yet." He grabbed my arm. Hard. "Listen to me. We can open the chamber in a controlled way. We can depressurize slow. We can. You want to open it because you want to feel like you're doing something," I said, yanking my arm free. "You want to be the guy who solved it. You want to tell the client you're brave." His eyes flashed. "I want to get paid." "There it is," I said. He leaned in close, breath hot with stale nicotine. "If you don't open it, they'll blame you. They'll say you killed him." "I didn't put it in his helmet," I said. "You don't know that," he hissed. That made me pause. The accusation wasn't logical. It was panicked. But panic makes people dangerous. "You think I did this?" I said. "I think you're enjoying it," he snapped. "I think you like being the one in control. You like telling everyone no." I stared at him for a long moment, then said, "Go to hell." He raised his hand like he might hit me again. Mac appeared behind him like a ghost. "Touch him," Mac said, "and I'll break your jaw." Lal froze, then dropped his hand, humiliated, and stomped away. Mac watched him go. Then he looked at me, and for the first time in all this, I saw real fear on his face. "You ever seen anything like this?" he asked. "No," I said. "You think it's living?" I thought about the way the film clung to the seal, the way the thread twitched when it hit air, the way it made grids in the trap like it was remembering a shape, the way it moved through systems where it shouldn't exist. "I think it's hungry," I said. That night, Harris got worse. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a Hollywood seizure with thrashing and screaming. It was subtle, which made it more terrifying. His chest rose and felt like he was breathing, but his eyes didn't track anything. His fingers kept curling, slow, like he was tugging invisible strings. Then the lines under his skin started flickering more often. Thin, pale flashes along his throat, his jaw, behind his ears. Routes. Highways. Ramos started sobbing, shoulders shaking. He kept pointing at Harris's neck, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I almost turned the intercom on. Almost. Human instinct. Compassion. Then the milky pattern in the exhale trap shifted into something too clean, too deliberate. A perfect little lattice, like a fishnet drawn in cream. And I left the intercom off. Around midnight, I heard knocking. Not the system pings. Not drips. A knock. Slow. Dull. From outside the chamber wall. It came from the direction of the sea. I stood so fast my chair skidded back. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself it was hull noise. A wave slap. A shifting container. Then it knocked again. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, like a code. Mac was asleep in his chair, head tilted back, mouth open. He jerked awake at the sound, eyes wide. "You hear that?" I whispered. He listened. His face tightened. "Yeah." We both stared at the chamber complex like staring would make steel transparent. The client rep was sitting in the corner, awake, as if he'd never slept at all. He looked at us, expression flat. "It's aware," he said. Mac's voice came out rough. "Of what?" "Us." The rep didn't answer. He just stood and walked out of dive control, toward the chamber, calm as a man going to check a fuse box. Mac grabbed his arm. "Where the hell are you going?" "To see," the rep said. "You don't see through steel," Mac snapped. The rep looked at him like he was slow. "You do if it wants you to." That chilled me more than the knocking. We followed him to the chamber. The red emergency lights made everyone look like they were bleeding. The boat hummed. The sea pressed in from all sides. The rep leaned close to the chamber wall, put his ear to it like he was listening to a heartbeat. I held my breath without meaning to. Knock, right under his ear. He didn't flinch. Knock, again. Then, faintly, through the steel, we heard something that wasn't a knock. A dragging, like a wet rope sliding along metal. Mac took a step back, swearing. "What the fuck?" The rep straightened. "It's seeking the gradient," he said, like he was reciting a fact from a manual. I stared at him. You knew something like this could happen. He looked at me. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Not guilt, not fear, interest. "We knew there were anomalies," he said. "We didn't know it would come up." My mouth went dry. "You sent us down anyway." He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He just looked at the chamber like it was an object he wanted to own. That's when I understood the real danger wasn't just a thing in Harris. It was what people would do if they got their hands on it. The rep turned toward the hatch controls. "We need a transfer," he said. "We need to move the system to a facility." Max stepped in front of him. "You're not opening that hatch." "We don't have to open it," the rep said. "We can detach. We can lift the entire complex." "We can. You can't." I cut in. "Not with them in there. Not with pressure. Not without risking a breach." The rep's eyes slid to me. "Then we stabilize pressure and wait." Wait. Like this was a weather delay. Inside the chamber, Harris's head turned slowly toward the window. His eyes focused for the first time in hours. He looked straight at me. His mouth opened. And even without the intercom, even through steel and glass and pressure, I swear to God I heard it. Not a voice, not words, but a sensation. A tiny constant tension in the hoses. A gentle tugging like fingers finding the weak point. Pressure keeps it calm, I thought. Pressure keeps it down. And then Harris smiled. Not with his mouth. With the lines under his skin flickering into a pattern that looked too much like a net. That smile snapped something in me. Not courage. Not resolve. Just the last little strand of "this is explainable." Matt grabbed my shoulder. "Back to control," he said, like he could herd the world into something manageable. We walked fast, boots ringing, and behind us the chamber wall gave one more slow knock like it was saying, "Yeah, run. You're still on my boat." In dive control, the air felt thicker. Not physically, just mentally. Every sound had weight now. The fan, the relay clicks, the faint hiss of gas through stainless lines. The client rep sat down on my console like it belonged to him. He didn't ask. He just rested his hand on the edge, eyes moving over my gauges like he knew them. That pissed me off more than anything else had. Like he was already rewriting the story in his head to make himself the center of it. "You're gonna keep pressure high," he said. Mac leaned in close. "You don't give orders in my control." The rep didn't even look at him. "If pressure drops, it will move. It will seek." Mac's hand curled into a fist. "Stop talking like you're reading a memo. That's a man in there." The rep finally looked up. "That man is compromised." I felt my mouth open before I had the thought. So are we. The system's dripping. The lines are pinging. Whatever this is, it's already outside him. The rep nodded, once like I'd said something obvious. "Then you will limit exposure and maintain containment." "Containment," I spat. On a rust bucket boat with piss lines and duct tape? The rep's eyes narrowed slightly. We brought the equipment. Your employer accepted the risk. My employer, I said, and I laughed sharp. You mean Lyle? Like I'd summoned him? Lyle stumbled into the doorway, still holding his head like it was going to fall off. He saw the rep sitting at my console and lit up, relieved to have someone hired to hide behind. Sir, Lyle said quickly, we can get this back on schedule. We just need to. The rep cut him off without looking. You will remain quiet. Lyle blinked, stunned. Excuse me. You will remain quiet, the rep repeated, and now his voice had steel in it. Not loud, just final. You have already made the situation worse. Lyle's face went red in a way that made the veins in his neck stand out. He looked at Mac, like Mac would defend him out of shared management stupidity. Mac just stared at him like he was a stain. Lyle swallowed his pride like it tasted bad, and he stayed. Quiet, but his eyes kept darting to the chamber controls, to the hatch, to the places where he could still hurt us. That's the part people don't talk about when they romanticize offshore work. It's not just the sea trying to kill you. It's the other humans, the ego, the money panic, the I'm not losing my bonus because you got scared bullshit. That night, the human part felt as dangerous as whatever was making nets in a moisture trap. We made landfall just after dawn. Not a port, not really. A private dock that didn't have signage. Floodlights. Security guys who didn't look like dock workers. Everyone moved with the quiet urgency of people who knew the rules were different here. They wanted the chamber complex craned off the boat as is. They didn't want to open it. They didn't want to depressurize. They wanted to treat it like a sealed container and ship it to somewhere that probably didn't exist on paper. Mac argued, loud, furious, because Mac still believed in normal solutions like medical evacuation and hospital. He kept saying the diver like the diver was still a diver and not a vehicle. The rep listened, then said no, just no. I thought Mac might swing on him. Mac didn't. Mac wasn't stupid, but I saw the moment he realized he was outgunned. Not physically, institutionally. The rep had phones. Mac had a clipboard. They set up a temporary control tent on the dock and ran umbilicals to keep power and monitoring on the chamber during transfer. It turned into a whole operation. Cranes, slings, people shouting hand signals. Salt air, diesel exhaust, the sound of waves slapping pilings under a dock that felt too clean for the coast. I stayed at the panel the whole time, eyes glued to my numbers, heart thudding like I was the one at depth. Every vibration from the crane made me flinch because I kept imagining a microfracture, a seal failure, a pressure drop that would give whatever was inside a gradient to climb. Inside the chamber, Ramos stared at the walls like he was waiting for them to open. Harris lay on the deck, breathing slow, face slack. The lines under his skin flickered occasionally, faint as fishing line in murky water. And the moisture trap still held that milky lattice. People came and went outside my control tent. Security, techs, men in hard hats who didn't smell like the sea. One guy carried a plastic case like he was going to collect samples. Another had a camera and kept trying to angle it toward the chamber window. I snapped at them. I didn't care who they were. No pictures, I said. Back up. When the security guy stepped toward me, chest puffed. The rep lifted a hand, and the security guy stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. The rep leaned in. You will be cooperative, he said to me. I stared at him. You want cooperative? Stop bringing people near my system. Every extra set of hands is another chance for a mistake. His eyes held mine, then he nodded once. Limit personnel, he ordered, and they did. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. It just confirmed he had that level of control, which meant this wasn't going to end with paperwork and a debrief. This was going to end with a sealed facility and a non-disclosure and a quiet thank you for your service that meant shut up or disappear. During the lift, the chamber pressure wobbled. Just a hair. A tiny dip as the power load shifted. My alarm chirped once, small, polite, and my entire body went hot. I slammed the emergency O2 feed and adjusted valve so fast my hands blurred. I watched the pressure stabilize, watched the numbers settle back where I'd pinned them. Inside the chamber, Harris's chest rose once, too slow, like a pump catching, and the milky lattice in the trap surged toward the outlet like it had smelled fresh air. Then the pressure steadied, and it retreated again, tightening back into a net. I sat back, sweating cold. Mac's face was inches from mine. "You saw that," he said. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's waiting," he said. "Yeah," I said again. "Waiting. Not dying. Not trapped. Waiting like a thing at the mouth of a cave waits for the tide." They set the chamber complex down in a warehouse near the dock. Big space, concrete floor, metal beams. The smell of old water and oil, like a boatyard but indoors. Everything echoed. Every footstep sounded like it was inside a tank. They wanted to move the complex again, truck it inland. The rep said the word facility like it meant safety. It didn't. It meant control. I told him flat, "You can't move it far without stable power and monitoring." "We have that," he said. "You don't have me," I said before I could stop myself. He paused. That was the first time I saw him actually calculate me as a variable. "You will come," he said. It wasn't a request. Mac stepped in. "He's not your employee." The rep's eyes slid to Mac. "He is the only person here who understands the system at a level required for containment. He will come." Mac's jaw worked. He looked at me like he wanted to tell me to refuse. But refusal out here wasn't a heroic stance. Refusal was a career suicide, maybe more than that. "I'm not leaving the panel," I said. The rep nodded. "Then you will be positioned with the panel." Lyle showed up again, because cockroaches always survive. He'd been hovering around the warehouse, talking to anyone who'd listen, trying to scrape back authority. "You're stealing my equipment," he told the rep. The rep looked at him like he was a fly. "This is not yours." Lyle's face twisted. "The contract is irrelevant," the rep said. "You will be compensated." Lyle's eyes flicked to me. Hate, pure and simple, because in his mind, I was the reason he was being sidelined, not the thing in the chamber. Me. He stalked away, and I watched him go with a sinking feeling that had nothing to do with depth. They loaded the complex onto a flatbed with shock mounts and an onboard generator. They ran cables and emergency backup lines. They wrapped the whole thing in tarps, like hiding it would change what it was. They put me in a support vehicle behind the truck with a portable monitoring setup and a radio link. Mac wanted to ride with me. The rep said no. Mac argued. The rep said no again, and a security guy stepped between them. Mac leaned in close to my ear, voice low and furious. "Don't let them open it." "I won't," I said. Mac's eyes were bloodshot from not sleeping. "If you have to do something, do it. Don't trust them." "I know," I said. The convoy rolled inland through flat coastal roads, past marshes and canals and little pockets of water that made the world feel like it was bleeding out into the sea. Every time we crossed a bridge, my stomach clenched. Water everywhere. Water under us. Water beside us. Like it was following. In the support vehicle, I stared at my portable readouts. Pressure stable. All fine. CO2 fine. Temperature holding. But the moisture trap camera feed, yes, they'd set up a feed, kept showing the lattice shifting. Not random. Responsive. Like it was feeling the vibration of the road. Every bump, the net tightened. Every smooth stretch, it loosened. It learned the rhythm of travel faster than I liked. Halfway there, the radio hissed with static that didn't sound like normal interference. It sounded like breathing, a thin, airy rasp behind the crackle. I adjusted frequencies. The hiss stayed. I looked out the window and saw nothing but gray sky and wet fields. Then the radio popped and a voice came through. Not Mac, not the rep, not a driver. Harris, weak, warped, like it had been squeezed through a straw. "Open," it said. I sat so still my muscles trembled. The radio hissed again. "Open." I slammed the radio off, yanked the power cable. My fingers shook so hard, I fumbled the connector. I sat there listening to the silence that followed like it might be worse. My driver, one of the security guys, looked back at me. "What's wrong?" I stared at him. He wasn't going to believe me. He wasn't built for belief. He was built for orders. "Nothing," I said, and my voice came out wrong. Radio interference. He turned forward again, satisfied. People like that are always satisfied as long as their world stays simple. My throat was dry. My heart pounded. I told myself it was stress. My brain filling in patterns. The hum of tires sounding like voices. That happens. Offshore you hear things. On night, watch as you imagine knocks. But the word had been clear. Open. We reached the facility near dusk. It was exactly what you think it is. A fenced compound in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a retention pond that looked too black for fresh water. Concrete buildings with no signs. Security cameras that track you like eyes. A smell of chemicals and wet earth. The pond bothered me most. It hugged the facility like a moat, and the surface was unnaturally still. No bugs, no ripes, no verdes. Just black water that reflected the lights in hard straight lines, like it was glass. They backed the flatbed into a loading bay and rolled the chamber complex inside on rails. The air in there was cold and dry and smelled like disinfectant. The kind of air that makes your nose sting. I hated it immediately because it didn't smell like the sea, but it felt like the sea had found a way to be there anyway. They put me in a control room adjacent to the chamber bay. Thick glass window, monitors, red emergency lights installed like a mood. Everything too clean. The rep met me there. He looked less like a doc guy now and more like what he was, someone who lived in controlled spaces. "You will maintain pressure," he said, again, like the only phrase in his vocabulary. "And when the diver dies?" I said. He blinked once. "He may not. He's already gone," I said, and my voice cracked a little despite my effort. "His body's still moving. That's not the same." The rep stared at me. "Do you have a plan that improves outcome?" "Yeah," I said. "Leave it in the ocean." His expression didn't change. "Not an option." "Then you're going to bring it into a building full of people," I said. "You're going to give it drains and vents and temperature gradients and a whole fucking labyrinth to explore. You're going to feed it." The rep's eyes narrowed. "You are emotional." I laughed, bitter. "I'm alive. That's what this is." He leaned closer, voice lower. "You are here because you're useful. Continue to be useful." He walked away. I sat at the panel in that sterile control room and felt like I'd been moved from one cage to another. They kept the chamber bay under red light, like we were still offshore, like recreating the vibe would keep it docile. They kept the pressure high. They kept the system sealed. They also brought in people. Scientists, maybe. Techs. Men and women in clean suits with clipboards and gloves. They watched through the glass. They took notes. They spoke in low voices I couldn't hear. I wanted to scream at them to leave. Instead, I watched the moisture trap. The milky lattice kept shifting. And now, in the controlled environment, it started doing something new. It made letters. Not clearly, not like someone writing on paper. But the lattice tightened into strokes, then loosened, then tightened again, forming shapes that felt like language in the way a shadow can feel like a hand. My skin prickled. I leaned closer, breath fogging the glass between me and the monitor. The shape looked like an O, then a P, then I, then. I shoved my chair back, so hard it nearly tipped. It wasn't random. It wasn't my brain. It was learning how to talk in patterns. They tried to wake Harris. They opened comms for the first time since offshore, thinking maybe they could reach the diver and assess neurological status. They called his name through the intercom, calm medical voices, like talking to him would bring him back. Harris's head turned slowly. His eyes focused. He looked toward the camera, and his mouth opened. What came out wasn't a scream. It was a wet, slow exhale that fogged the inside of his visor. The fog didn't disperse. It gathered in thin lines that branched like veins. It pressed against the glass from the inside, not outward but sideways, like it was trying to find the edge. Then the handprint appeared again. What from inside? Perfect. One of the techs swore softly. Another stepped back like he'd been slapped. The rep watched, expression flat. Pressure holds. I stared at him. You keep saying that like it's a solution. It is, he said. It held, yes, but it didn't solve. That night, second night from when it started, Harris died. Not dramatically, not with a final gasp. His heart monitor started doing a strange thing. It slowed, then sped, then slowed like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stop. Then it flatlined. A long, steady tone filled the control room, and every person in that clean space froze like the sound had teeth. A medic, real medic this time, rushed in, barking orders, calling for a crash cart, as if you could resuscitate someone through inches of steel and a sealed hatch. They stared at the chamber door like they could will it open. The rep raised a hand. No. The medic turned on him, furious. He's in cardiac arrest. He is deceased, the rep said calm. We maintain containment. The medic's face twisted. You can't just. Yes, the rep said. We can. The medic looked at the others for support. Some looked away. Some looked at the floor. No one challenged the rep. Not here. Not in this place. I stared at Harris on the camera feed. His chest rose once after the flatline. Slow. Too slow. Then stopped. For a moment, I felt relief. Not because a man died. Because maybe whatever was in him died too. Then the lines under his skin flickered. Not faintly. Bright. A web of routes lighting up under his throat and jaw and behind his eyes, as if the thing inside him had been waiting for the heart to stop because the heart was in the way. The moisture trap filled again, milky, and the lattice snapped into a net so clean it made my stomach drop. I heard a soft sound in the control room. A drip. Everyone heard it. Heads turned. People scanned the ceiling like idiots, like a building could sweat. The drip came from the sink. A stainless sink in the corner of the control room that no one used. The faucet was off. The drain was dry, and yet a bead of clear, slick liquid formed at the rim and fell. Plink. The medic backed away from it like it was acid. The rep's eyes sharpened. Seal drains, he ordered. People moved fast suddenly. Someone slammed a cap over the sink drain. Someone taped it. Someone threw absorbent pads on the floor. The bead formed again. Plink. It wasn't coming from the drain. It was coming from the air, from humidity that wasn't supposed to exist in that dry, sterile room. From water the building didn't know it had. My mouth went dry. It's here, I whispered. The rep looked at me. Pressure holds, he said again, but this time his voice wasn't quite as steady, because the thing wasn't waiting at a gradient anymore. It had found other paths. They tried to move the chamber complex deeper into the facility to a more isolated bay with redundant systems. They thought physical distance would help. They thought thicker walls would help. They didn't understand water doesn't care about walls. Water finds ways. It seeps. It creeps. It condenses. It becomes invisible in air and then becomes itself again in the wrong place. As they rolled the complex down a corridor, the overhead lights flickered. Not a normal flicker, a pulse like a heartbeat. The corridor's fire sprinkler heads began to weep. Just one at first. A bead forming, falling. Plink. Then another. Plink. Then a line of them, down the corridor like a trail. People panicked. Not screaming. Just that tight, fast movement where everyone suddenly wants to be somewhere else. A tech slipped on the slick film and hit the floor hard, swearing. Two security guys hauled him up and dragged him away, leaving a smear behind. The smear stretched. It held. It didn't behave like a smear. It behaved like something that didn't want to let go. We got the complex into the deeper bay, sealed doors, negative pressure ventilation, all the facility tricks. The rep looked satisfied, like a man who'd just reorganized a problem into a file folder. Then the knocking started, not in the chamber, in the facility walls. Dull thuds, spaced evenly, moving from one wall section to another like footsteps. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Someone said, "That's plumbing." Someone else said, "There's no plumbing in that wall." Thunk. I stared at the monitor feed of Harris's corpse. His eyes were open now, staring at nothing. His mouth hung slightly open, and from his lips, a thin, pale filament emerged and stretched toward the inside of his visor. pressing against it, as if tasting the barrier. Then it retracted. I felt bile rise in my throat. Ramos, still alive, still trapped in the chamber with a dead man, started pounding on the inner door. His face was contorted with terror and rage. When they'd opened comms earlier, they heard him screaming, begging to be let out, promising anything. They cut comms again because it didn't help and it made everyone feel guilty. Now he was silent on the feed, mouth moving in furious shapes. He pointed at the moisture trap. He pointed at Harris. He pointed at his own throat. He mimed cutting his throat, then pointed at himself. He was telling us, "Kill me before it uses me too." Nobody said it out loud, but everyone saw it. The rep stepped into the control room, face set. "We will depressurize and extract the living diver." Every cell in my body screamed no. I stood up so fast my chair scraped. "Are you out of your fucking mind? We cannot leave a survivor in there indefinitely," he said. "That survivor is the only reason it hasn't spread." I snapped. "Pressure and containment. You open the hatch, you give it what it wants." The rep's jaw tightened. "We will do a controlled decompression in a sealed environment. We will sedate. We will isolate." "You don't understand," I said, voice rising despite myself. "It doesn't need you to make mistakes. It uses the system. It uses condensation. It uses tiny differences. You could be perfect and still feed at a gradient." One of the techs spoke up timid. "We could raise pressure further. Pin it deeper." I latched onto that like a lifeline. "Yes, raise pressure. Keep it pinned." Ramos on the camera feed shook his head violently. He slapped his own chest, then pressed his palm to the glass. His hand left a faint wet print too, like Harris's had. My skin went cold. Ramos wasn't contaminated yet. He was becoming a surface, a place for it to press outward. The rep looked at Ramos, then at me. "The diver will not survive indefinitely under elevated pressure," he said. "He won't survive anyway if you open it." I shot back. The rep held my gaze. "We will proceed." Mac wasn't there anymore. They'd sent him away when the facility took over. Law was gone too, probably drinking somewhere and calling lawyers. It was just me in a room full of people who had never lived underwater and didn't respect what it did. They started the depressurization plan. I refused to touch the controls. The rep had someone else ready. Another life support tech flown in, a guy with clean hands and a crisp haircut who looked like he'd only ever worked in training simulators. He sat down on my panel like he belonged there. I stepped in and grabbed his wrist. "Don't," I said. He flinched. "Sir, I have orders." "Listen to me," I hissed. "You drop pressure, you give it a ladder. It climbs ladders." He swallowed, eyes darting to the rep. "I have to." I stared at him and realized he wasn't evil. He was just obedient. Obedience kills more people than monsters ever will. I let go. I backed away. My hand shook. The rep nodded at the tech. "Begin." The tech started the slow, controlled depressurization. At first, nothing happened. The numbers slid down by tiny increments. The chamber held. The moisture trap lattice shifted but stayed contained. Then, like a shark sensing blood, it reacted. The milky net surged toward the outlet. It climbed the walls of the trap. It pressed against the transparent plastic like it wanted through. Ramos jerked back in his bunk, eyes wide. He slapped his throat. His mouth opened in a silent scream. The lines under Harris's skin flared bright, then dimmed, then bright again, like a signal. The sink in the control room dripped faster. Plink, plink, plink. A tech swore and slapped more pads down, as if pads could stop a thing that moved like pressure. The corridor lights pulsed. Thunk sounds moved down the wall. The tech at my panel looked at me, panicked. "It's doing something." "No shit," I snapped, and I hated myself for it because he was scared too. "Stop the depress." He hesitated, eyes flicking to the rep. The rep's voice was calm. "Continue." Home was convulsed, not full-body thrashing. A tight, violent shudder in his shoulders, like something grabbed a nerve bundle and yanked. His hands flew to his collar ring. He clawed under it. His fingers came away slick with something that wasn't sweat. Then his head snapped toward the camera, eyes wide, and he mouthed a word. I read lips a little from years of watching divers through glass. He mouthed up. Then he pointed at the ceiling of the chamber. Then he pointed at the hatch. Then he mimed something crawling. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like decompression. The thing wasn't just in Harris. It was in the chamber environment now. In the humidity, in the lines, in the exhale condensate. And as pressure dropped, it was moving upward inside the chamber like a tide reversing. Stop, I said again louder. Stop now. The tech's hands hovered over the controls, trembling. The rep stepped forward, eyes hard. We proceed. I did the only thing I could do that wasn't hero bullshit again. I lunged for the emergency pressure increase valve. The rep grabbed my arm. No, I twisted, yanked free, and slammed the valve open. Pressure surged. Alarms chirped. People shouted. The tech at the panel cursed, trying to regain control. Inside the chamber, Ramos collapsed like gravity doubled. The crawling motion stopped. The milky net snapped back into itself, tightening, retreating from the outlet like it had been burned. The sink drip slowed. The thunks in the wall stopped. Silence hit the control room like a wave. Everyone stared at me. The rep's face went dark. You will not sabotage this. Sabotage? I barked, incredulous. I just saved your whole goddamn facility. The rep stepped in close, voice low. You are interfering with containment protocol. I'm the containment protocol. I snapped back. You people don't even know what you're poking. His eyes narrowed. You are replaceable. That line landed in my chest like a hook. Because it was true in his world. I was a tool, a valve, a piece of equipment that could be swapped out. But I was also the only person in that room who understood what it felt like to be under pressure. What meant to be pinned. What meant to have the ocean push on you until you didn't feel human. And I knew one more thing now. Pressure worked. Pressure calmed it. Pressure held it down. So I made a decision that didn't feel like bravery. It felt like surrender. I'm going into the chamber, I said. The room went still. The tech at the panel stared at me like I'd said I was going to jump into a furnace. The rep tilted his head slightly. Why? Because you're going to keep trying to open it, I said. Because you're going to keep trying to extract and study and control. And because I can't let you. The rep's gaze sharpened. You cannot enter without depressurization. I can enter the entry lock, I said. I can seal myself in. I can run it from inside. I can keep pressure stable. I can keep eyes on the traps without relying on your people. The rep stared at me for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded once. You will do as instructed inside, he said. I laughed. No, I'll do what keeps it contained. His eyes stayed flat. If you die, that is acceptable. There was again the casualness, the way he treated death like a line item. I didn't argue. Arguing was for people who thought persuasion mattered. They prepped the entry lock. They ran checks. They tried to talk me out of it in soft voices like I was suicidal. I wasn't suicidal. I was terrified. But there's a point where fear becomes a direction instead of feeling. Fear points you toward the only move that doesn't end with everyone dead. I suited up in a simple chamber coverall, no dive suit, no helmet. Just a pressure garment and a respirator in case. They wanted me in full protective gear. I refused. Too much equipment, too many seals, too many places for it to cling. I carried a small kit. Analyzer, spare valves, rations, water bottles, a piss bottle, and a wrench because I trusted metal more than people. Before I stepped into the lock, I looked through the window into the main chamber. Harris lay on the deck, dead eyes staring upward. The lines under his skin flickered faintly like bioluminescent worms under flesh. Ramos sat slumped against the wall, eyes half open, breathing slow. His neck had faint pale knots under the skin now, like the beginnings of beads on a string. He looked at the window. He saw me. He shook his head weakly. He didn't want company. He didn't want a witness. He wanted someone to end it. I lifted my hand, palm to the glass, and for a second my skin crawled as if something on the other side pressed back. I forced myself to step into the lock. The inner door sealed behind me with a heavy clunk that felt like a coffin closing. Outside, through the small porthole, I saw the rep and the techs watching. Their faces looked distant already, like I'd become part of the equipment. I started equalizing pressure, slow and controlled, feeling my ears pop, my sinuses complain. The air changed. It tasted more metallic, more dry. Helium makes everything feel thin, like the world's been stripped of softness. As pressure rose in the lock to match the chamber, the walls around me creaked. Not loud, just a slow flex, like steel remembering its limits. And then I heard it. Not a drip, not a thunk, a gentle tug, and the respirator hose on my chest, like someone testing it. My hands went cold. I stared at the hose, expecting to see it bulge or move. It didn't. The tug happened again, tiny, patient, like fingers. Pressure keeps it calm, I reminded myself. Pressure keeps it down, but it was already touching my gear. The lock finished equalizing. The inner door's bolts released with a metallic click. I hesitated with my hand on the wheel. I'm not going to pretend I didn't think about running, about spinning the wheel back, dropping pressure, walking away, letting them handle it, letting the facility burn itself down if it wanted. Then I pictured the milky net climbing out of the sink drain, the way it wrote shapes, the way it used pressure like a ladder. If I walked away, they'd open it, they'd study it, they'd bring it in, and then it would be everywhere water existed, which is everywhere. I turned the wheel. The door swung open. Chamber air hit me, warm, damp, heavy with human smell and recycled breath. The light was red, low. Harris's body looked wrong in it, like a wax mannequin left too long in sun. Ramos lifted his head slowly. His eyes found me. He tried to speak, but his voice came out a thin helium squeak through the chamber mic, distorted and weak. Don't. I stepped inside. The inner door shut behind me. Now I was in it, fully. No glass, no barrier except steel and pressure in my own hands. Ramos started coughing small, dry coughs like his throat was full of dust. He pressed his palm to his neck, and I saw the faint pale knots move, sliding upward. Beads on a string. I wanted to help him. Instinct. Human reflex. But I didn't touch him. I moved to the panel inside the chamber. Yes, there's an internal control panel for emergencies. It's basic, but it's enough. I checked pressure. Stable. I checked scrubbers. Working. I checked the moisture traps inside. The exhale trap was full of the milky lattice, held in place by the pressure. The lattice shifted when I leaned close. It tightened. It made a shape that looked like an eye. My stomach lurched. Home was slumped. Breathing. He looked at Harris's body and started crying quietly, shoulders shaking. No dramatic sobe. Just tears running down his face, lost in the sweat. He looked like a man who'd been trapped underwater too long. I swallowed hard. Ramos, I said, and my voice sounded ridiculous in the helium atmosphere, like a cartoon. It made me hate speaking. Ramos didn't answer. He just lifted his hand and pointed at Harris's mouth. I looked. A thin, pale filament emerged from Harris's lips again, slow, tasting the air. It stretched toward the chamber ceiling, as if drawn upward. Then it paused, as if it sensed me. Then it retracted back into the mouth with a smoothness that made my skin crawl. I backed away, heart hammering. Outside the chamber, I heard muffled voices. The rep, the techs, probably arguing about next steps. Their words were distorted through the steel, just low murmurs. It sounded like the ocean through a bulkhead. A knock came from outside the hatch. Sharp, impatient. Then another. They wanted me out already. I didn't answer. I moved my kit to a corner, set rations and bottles down, organized like I was going camping. That was me trying to trick my brain into normal. Ramos watched me, eyes wide. You can't, he wheezed. I can, I said, voice squeaky and stupid. I have to. He shook his head weakly. It once. He gagged mid-sentence. A thread slid from his mouth, thin, pale. It twitched in the chamber air like it hated it. Ramos slapped at it and it snapped back in fast. He stared at me, terror flooding his eyes. Up, he whispered. There was again. That word. Up. The motif that kept punching through everything. It climbed. Ramos's chest rose and fell faster. CO2 panic, maybe, or something else. The knots under his neck slid upward, one after another. I checked the scrubbers again. CO2 was stable. So why was he panicking? Because his body knew what his mind didn't want to admit. I sat on the bench by the panel, my hand on the controls like earlier on the boat. Priest with a coffin. Outside, fists knocked on the hatch. Muffled voices shouted. Someone pounded harder, angry now. You can't stay in there, someone yelled, words distorted. I didn't answer. Hours passed, or minutes. Time is weird under stress. It folds. Ramos got quieter. His breathing slowed. His eyes rolled slightly. He looked drunk. Hypoxic? No, numbers were okay. But his body wasn't his anymore. You could see that. The way his fingers twitched without intent. The way his jaw clenched and unclenched like something was testing muscles. Then he sat up abruptly, rigid like Harris had. His arms lifted, elbows locking. His mouth opened, and the pale knots under his neck rose in a line. I stood, heart pounding, and backed away until my shoulders hit steel. Ramos jerked forward and his forehead hit the chamber window. It left a wet handprint from inside too. Not from his hand, from whatever pressed outward through him. The pressure pinned it, but it still wanted out. It still searched. Ramos slid down the glass, leaving a smear. The smear stretched. It held. It didn't drip like blood should. It clung like that egg-white film on Harris's helmet seal. Ramos's eyes met mine one last time, and I saw something like apology there, which broke my heart because none of this was his fault. Then his chest rose once, too slow, and he went still. Silence filled the chamber. Not peaceful silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. Two bodies now, two maps, two sets of routes. The lines under their skin didn't disappear. They just waited. I sat down hard, shaking. My mouth tasted like metal. My tongue felt too big in helium air. I swallowed and tasted salt, like the sea had crept into my throat. Outside, the knocking on the hatch changed. It wasn't angry pounding anymore. It became patient. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Like a code. Like a heartbeat. I stared at the hatch wheel and imagined turning it. Imagined the rush of pressure equalizing, the relief in my ears, the ability to breathe normal air again. Then I imagined the milky net surging out of the traps, flowing into the facility's vents, into its drains, into the pond outside, into groundwater, into rivers, into pipes, into every shower and sink and reservoir. Water always finds a path, and this thing wasn't alive like a fish. It was alive like water is alive when it wants somewhere to go. I leaned toward the internal panel and increased pressure again, tiny increments, pinning it deeper. The chamber groaned softly. The steel complained. My ears popped. My sinuses burned. The moisture trap lattice tightened, then stilled. The tug of my respirator hose eased. For a moment, the chamber felt calmer. Pressure keeps it calm, I thought. Pressure keeps it down. I stayed in there. I ate rations, dry crackers that turned to paste in my mouth. I drank water that tasted like plastic. I pissed in a bottle and capped it tight. Every human thing I did felt obscene in that sealed steel space with 2 dead men and a thing that wanted up. Outside, they kept knocking. They kept demanding. They kept telling me I couldn't live in there. They were right. You can't live under pressure forever. You can't keep your body pinned without consequences. You can't stay in an environment where every breath is filtered and every mistake is fatal. But I wasn't thinking about living. I was thinking about keeping a door closed. The rep came to the hatch a few times. I recognized his voice through the steel, calm even now. "You will open," he said once. I didn't answer. "You are not authorized," he said another time. I laughed, quiet and ugly, and the sound bounced around the chamber like it didn't belong. Authorization didn't matter down here. Pressure did. The facility tried things. I could tell. The vibrations changed. The hum of external pumps. The faint hiss of valves adjusting on the other side. They were trying to find a way to override me. Each time they messed with pressure, even slightly, the moisture trap lattice reacted, tightening, shifting, searching. Each time, I pushed back with more pressure, pinning it, forcing it to retreat. It became a tug of war, not with muscle, but with gradients, with the basic physics of up and down. Days blurred. My skin got itchy from the dry, recycled air. My joints ached. My head felt light sometimes, like helium had seeped into my thoughts. I started talking to myself just to hear a human voice, then stopped because I didn't want it listening. Sometimes in the quiet, I heard the gentle tug in the hoses again. Tiny, constant, like fingers searching. Sometimes I heard the drip sound inside the chamber, even though there shouldn't be any new liquid. A soft plink from nowhere. Sometimes I heard knocking not from the hatch, but from the chamber wall, from the side that faced the facility's pond. Slow, dull knocks like something outside was tapping steel from the water side. That was the worst, because it meant it wasn't only in here anymore. Or maybe it never was only in here. Maybe the ocean had always been full of it, and we were the idiots who brought a piece of that pressure world up into our warm air world, thinking we owned the boundary. I'm writing this from inside the chamber because writing is the last thing that makes me feel like a person. I kept it pressurized. I told them it's a safety hold. I told them the system needs stabilization. I lied until my mouth went dry. I can hear it sometimes, not as a voice, more like a tiny, constant tension in the hoses, like something tugging gently to find the weak point. Pressure keeps it calm. Pressure keeps it down. So I'm staying in here. I'm eating crashens. I'm pissing in a bottle. I'm listening to the steel creak, and I'm watching the moisture trap like it's a bomb. Outside, they keep knocking. They keep demanding. They keep telling me I can't live in there. They're right. But if I open the hatch, I'm not the only one who dies.